What's good, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Get Defensive Sports Network's Power 2 podcast, where we are here to talk about the power of playoff expansion,
Period.
the power of becoming an uncle for the second time,
Oh, I love this for you.
and the power of pre-recording podcasts.
Yes, because again, we are breaking the fourth wall.
You can't,
Again,
you can't pre-record a podcast and not tell people it's pre-recorded
yes, you
because then
can.
something not with college football, because this is going to come out on whenever it comes out, and like the day before we're going to have the biggest news in the world, and they're going to be like, so you're not going to talk about X thing, like you're not going to talk about
That's fair. That's
Georgia
fair.
coach getting fired and this player getting arrested, and the playoff is now officially 25 teams. Like something's going to happen. They're like, so like y'all not, and we're not going to have a real episode for 2 weeks, so we're definitely going to miss something big. And it always works out.
See, now
like
why you got to put that out in the universe? We're not going to miss anything big.
Okay.
Hopefully.
How confident are you?
So, anyways, we're going to talk about the power of pre-recorded episodes.
Yes. The power of electronics.
The power of Jordan being out of town and being unreliable to do the episodes in real time. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, it'd be your own people that hate on you.
Me, who is dedicated to my podcasting.
Don't lie.
I traveled with my podcast
Don't
gear.
get on here and lie. Don't get
I
on here and
traveled
lie.
with my
Don't get on
podcast
here
gear.
and lie.
And I shot the show in real time.
I didn't have to do gymnastics to record with you because you was gone every single weekend.
It was not gymnastics. Okay.
I was breaking my back to try to fit into your schedule. I was
traveling with my gear. So therefore, even if you were breaking your back, I was still showing my dedication to this show.
Hotel room by yourself with a desk and plugs and things. I'm not doing that. Since you want to put my business out there, since you want to talk about me.
This episode's about to be so ghetto because we've been sitting here recording all day. This is about to be ghetto.
Talking about
college football,
the playoff. The college football playoff, to be exact. As you all are well aware, as you are well versed, as you are well knowledgeable about, we are on the cusp of having a 16-team playoff. And by cusp, I mean we're not going to find out for 6 more months because these people don't do anything well. They don't do anything well at all. Not a single thing, especially when it comes to being on time. But we're talking about anyway. This is our last, hopefully, conversation about the playoff until it is official. But we had an idea that we thought was going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be very interesting, and it works perfectly because, again, pre-recording, to look back at the playoffs. This was done technically by the playoff people, the SEC in particular, when they were being a little shady. They, the Big Ten and the SEC did this when it was originally going to be 14 teams. They essentially looked at like how many teams, each conference would have gotten in when they were trying to push for the 4-4-2-2-1 alignment. And so they basically came out and said, if it was always 12 or if it was always 14, this is how many on average your conference would have gotten in. And so we wanted to simply do something similar, but slightly more in depth, looking at how many teams would have gotten in per conference over the last 10 seasons
years.
From 20. Actually, it's 11, if I remember correctly.
Technically, yes. Well, no, because 2025's data is not on here.
Well, you have to count 2014. So it's 11. Just count them in your head. Just count each year. It's 11 seasons. I just counted them. 11 seasons. I don't know why you're looking like that. Just count them.
Okay, go ahead.
Just count them.
I'm computing. Can I compute? Go ahead.
No. You froze. What are you doing?
I was computing.
This is an audio medium. You can't just freeze.
I was computing, but you should also see that I didn't actually freeze, that I was computing because you are watching us on YouTube at Get Defensive Sports Network on YouTube. So therefore, you saw me computing. Thank you so much because I am not putting on makeup for nothing. Frozen. You people are watching us on YouTube.
Yes, you are.
Thank you.
So 11 seasons of data of if this was a 16 team playoff, who would have gotten in. I did this based on what is most likely going to be the thing, which is five automatic qualifiers, one for the Power Four, and then one for the highest G5 champion. The way I did this for the years that had the Pac 12, I did it how the 14 playoff essentially was, where it was the highest rated, the four highest rated. So obviously, through most of the data, it was the Power Five, but the four highest rated got the automatic bids. But ultimately, with 16 teams, essentially every conference champ got in most years. So we're going to look 2014 to 2024, 16 team playoff, who gets in, who does not. And so I think an interesting place to start would be I guess maybe I should explain how I did this. I guess I already explained it. I went back, I picked all the conference championships. I looked through the history, got all the conference championships. I then did I looked at the playoff from the final top 25 from the college football playoff ranking. In the years where it made sense, I just did 1 through 16. In the year where the highest rated G5 team was not ranked in the top 16, which did not happen every year, but did happen a couple of years, I then jumped them to number 16. Most of the years, because it's 16 teams, the highest rated G5 team actually was involved. If you remember, there were multiple years where UCF was really good, where Cincinnati was really good. And so they were essentially top 10 teams. But there were a couple of years like 2014 for one, 2015 for one, 2019, 2020, and 2022, where the highest rated G5 team was not in the top 16. So they came in at the bottom. And so basically, by looking at the conference champions, by looking at all of the final top 25 college football playoff rankings from the CFP committee, I determined who would make these. So I think we should
Come
start.
on, data.
I think we should start um, with the conferences.
Yes. I would
Sound
also like
fair?
to shout out Jordan because he did also aggregate playoff appearances by conference as well as appearances by team. Come on, data.
Try to do my little something, something, something every once in a while. So, um, conferences: ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Pac 12, SEC, G5, and then Notre Dame on its own. So 11 years, the ACC would have gotten 23 teams in the playoff. The most they would have gotten in any single year is three. They would have gotten three, four separate times. The lowest they would have gotten is one. They would have gotten one in three separate times. The Big Ten, so their average of the 11
And the
seasons,
majority of
they
the time it's
averaged,
Clemson.
yes, they averaged 2.3 playoff entrants per year in a hypothetical 16 team playoff. The Big Ten had 40 entrants.
Come on, math. That's 40.
Yeah.
That's 40.
Yeah, okay. Whatever.
Anyways.
The Big Ten had 40 playoff entrants for an average of 4 a year. The highest that they would have had is 5 in 2015. The lowest that they would have had is 2 in 2014. They legitimately averaged basically 4 a year. Like
Yeah.
almost every single year it was 4. The Big 12 had a total of 24 teams. They I would put them at 2.4. The lowest they would have had is 1. The highest they would have had is 3. Most of the time they got 2 in.
At least two, because the lowest
Yeah,
was last year. So
correct. They, which is very interesting because we're talking about this, and even in 16 teams, the Big 12 still would have only had 1 team, which feels wrong, but was correct. So they really cannibalized themselves. They had 1 extra team than the ACC. The Pac 12, which is, if we're thinking about it, throughout the history, was the third best conference. They also ended up with 24, but they ended up with 24 because they didn't have a Pac 12 in 2024.
Last
And
year.
so
Yeah.
some of those teams were then in other conferences that went in. For example, Oregon made it, which would have been for them.
One. Yeah.
Arizona made it, which would have been for them. And maybe there was another one, I don't remember. But the Pac 12 in one less year, also 24 participants, average 2.4. But again, the Pac 12 is a little bit different. The most the Pac 12 would have had is five. They tied the Big Ten with five. The least they would have had is zero, but that zero is weird. And it's because of the pandemic. The Pac 12 like barely played in the pandemic and they started later than others and they just had like a really, really weird year. So, and then they also had zero in 2024 because they didn't exist. The SEC had the most with 43, so three more over this time frame than the Big Ten. They would have averaged 4.3. The most that they would have had in a single year is six.
And they did that
The
twice.
yes, the least they would have had in a single year is two, and they also would have done that twice. The G5 averaged 15, so there were a couple of years where they got in more than one. For an average of 1.5 teams in this data set. The most they would have gotten in a single year is three during 2020. That is the pandemic year. That was a weird year. But the year after that, they would have gotten two. And then Notre Dame, because you do have to talk about them because they would have been invited from 2014 to 2024. They
have gotten in 7 times.
Yes. Okay, so my data is wrong. Hold on. So this is let me do this again. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It is 11 seasons. My data is divided by 10, not 11.
So ignore everything he just said about averages. The numbers are still correct, but the averages are wrong.
Okay, I was like, I'm like looking at this and I'm like, there's something wrong with this data.
Okay, so the averages went down
Slightly.
ever so slightly,
Not
but
it's
the point
essentially
still
the same.
stands. Yeah, I mean the
Yeah.
point still stands. ACC would have averaged a little over 2 teams per cycle. The Big Ten, excuse me, would have averaged a little over 3.6 per cycle. Big 12 2.2 basically per cycle. Pac 12 same thing 2.2. SEC 3.9. G5 1.3, and then Notre Dame just a little under 0.6% of the time they would be in
Yes.
there.
Notre Dame made it 7 times in 11 years.
Yeah. So
They made it they made it 5 years in a row from 2017 to 2021. They didn't make it in 2022 or 2023.
and then they're
Made it
back.
again in 2024. They made it 7 times in 11 years.
Yeah.
So I just thought you sorry. This is the like you said, it's largely still the same, but I just knew that there was something wrong with my formula here. So no one averaged exactly four. But again, as you would expect, the SEC 3.9, the Big Ten 3.6. Those were the highest. Everyone else, the ACC and Big 12 and the Pac 12, were all at varying levels of lower than two.
2. Yeah.
Low twos, G5 1.3. Notre Dame made it 7 times in 11 years. So
Thank you for
I know you're not
recapping
the
everything
biggest
I just
college.
recapped.
Yes, 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 yes. Exactly.
So, I mean, I guess that means that there's a little bit of legitimacy to the 4+4+2 plus whatever playoff structure that we discussed when we talked about it this last. Like, there is legitimacy to saying, okay, if the Big Ten just has 4 guaranteed spots, SEC has 4 guaranteed spots, because on average, that is what has been happening.
Yes. And so that was the conversation, and I love that you brought that up because it's like the problem with the 4-4-2-2-1 isn't that it was fake or that it was unreal or that it was unlikely. It's just that you would be making these two conferences put it on paper,
Yeah.
and that's what they didn't want to do. But like there's a bit of a give and take, right? Because it's like with everything, it's a give and take. The ACC, for example, their average was 2.09.
Yeah.
So if
What's
you
who's to
don't
say they might
accept
not get 3?
right, if you don't accept the two, you have 3 years in this data where you only get one team in. But there's also 4 years in this data where you get three teams in.
3.
The Big 12 almost always gets two. Almost always gets two. They've only ever gotten one team once. It would have been 2024, but they've also only gotten three teams three times out of 11 years. So it's like you're sort of I mean, like we're saying, it does even out to that. It's just they don't want to put it in writing, and they do want that hope that there is a year that they get three, but I think they're ignoring the years that they only get one and how that would account and how that would matter for them.
And I'm still not a fan of putting it on paper because of that too. Like, yes, the data would suggest this, but also who's to say that talent doesn't get distributed in a different kind of way, and then the Big 12 does get four teams in or three teams in or whatever, but then they only have the two guaranteed spots. Like, that's the part that's, to me, it almost like skews the competition in a way, if that makes sense, because it'll skew it towards obviously the Big Ten and the SEC. Because yes, on average they get more teams in, duh, but like it's also like I feel like that will also skew players to want to play in those conferences because there's a better chance of them getting into. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
but unfortunately, that's already happening.
well, yeah, I'm
But
not.
you are
Yes,
right
yes,
that when you put it on paper, because like I could have told you this, right? If you thought about it, even though you're not a college football historian, you probably could have told this. But like an 18-year-old doesn't have this data. They
yeah,
don't know, so they can be talked to. They can be convinced. You can tell them these things. But when it is on paper, it is true. It's like you are less like if I'm a Big Ten school, I can go to you and say you're less likely to get into the playoffs. There are only
yeah,
two teams. Like if you're not on one of those two teams, you're not going to get in.
yeah.
We're going to get minimum four, probably five or six. So like you just you're playing better competition. You're more likely to get to the playoffs. Like that is something to consider. Um, my big issue though with them sort of especially wanting the 5 and 11 is that we're not really getting to a place where it's more even.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why I say that, let's just look at the last 3 years, right? In 2024, the Big Ten would have had four, the SEC would have had six. 2023, the Big Ten would have had three, the SEC would have had five. 2022, they both would have had three. In those same years, the ACC only would have had two twice, and the Big Ten, Big 12 would have had one of those times. So we're getting like the data is not evening out. Like and the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I chose those years is I'm looking at the NIL years and I'm looking at when we're supposed to have the transfer portal, more of the player movement, more of these sort of things. It's not getting better for them; it's getting worse. And
The
if you look
parity
at the
is,
if yeah,
yeah,
if you look at the Big Ten this year, if this was 16 teams, I would bet you right now the Big Ten gets five. I could
yeah,
name the five that they probably get in, and the SEC probably gets five at least, right? The SEC was really weird last year because they all were 9-3, which is how they get to six. Like they were all sort of grouped right there,
right there,
and that's
yeah.
not going to happen every year. But it's like it's hard because what is the Big 12, for example? What is to say next year or the year after that? Like, what's going to change between now and the next 5 years that you're not going to consistently only have one team? Like, we watched it. Last year was one of the best years for the Big 12, but they also all
Still only got one
cannibalized
team.
themselves.
Yeah.
So it was super fun to watch, but ultimately they only got one team. Like, how do we know that's not going to be the exact same this year? How do we know it's not going to be the exact same next year?
But also, how do we know that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to stay the dominant
Well,
conferences? Like, how do we
I
know that? And
because
and
they
I know
have
that,
significantly more. Like that is
yes, I
just
know they have significantly more money. Yes. But however, there's also the conversation of like playing time, right? And the conversation of like a lot of talented players are going to want to either, a lot of talented players I think are weighing a few things. Number one, they're weighing their ability to leverage the brand of whatever school that they're going to get NIL deals. That is a part of the decision making process, right? There is obviously the coaching, the staff, the whatever, blah blah, blah, the fit, all of that. That is being considered as well. But also playing time is something that's being considered. If you are going to the bigger brands in a Big Ten or SEC school, you are going to sit your ass down for 3 years before you get to touch the ball. A lot of players are not going to want to do that. They're going to want to go to quote unquote smaller market or other types of schools where they have a better chance of actually playing. And I feel like that could also skew things in a way. Like, yes, the Big Ten and the SEC are always going to attract the highest talent. They're always going to do that. But I also feel like who's to say that like it's it's always going to be them. Like it's always going to, I don't
It's
know.
always going to be them. So my I understand the logic of your argument, but I think what you're missing is like your argument is correct if you're talking about teams, but not conferences, if that makes sense. So, like, to your
Mm,
point of talking about playing time, right? You may be right that not everyone now is going to go to Ohio State and Georgia.
mm,
But that helps Texas. Because if you remember, 5 years ago, Texas
mm-hmm,
wasn't good.
mm-hmm.
That helps Penn State. That helps Oregon. It helps Illinois. It helps Mississippi State. It doesn't help North Carolina. Like, that's my thing, where it's like, I do think there is going to be a slight distribution of talent, but I still think it's going to be in the same conferences. So
I
instead
see that.
of Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama having 15 5 stars between the three of them, the 15 5 stars are now going to be at Georgia,
Distribute down
Ohio
through.
State, Texas,
Yeah.
Penn State, Oregon, and Bama. So
Yeah.
now it's 15 players for 6 teams instead of 3, but those players are still in the Big Ten and SEC. I
Yeah.
do think we're going to see more champions where Penn State has a chance to win. Texas is probably going to win one eventually. Oregon's going to win one for their first time ever. But, like, I don't see Pittsburgh winning one, even in this talent
Yeah.
distribution. I don't see, as much as it pains me because I do root for them because I went to school there, I don't see West
West
Virginia winning
Virginia.
one.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's the thing where it's true, but when we're talking, especially because you remember the conferences are bigger now. So when Oregon was in the Pac-12 and when Texas was in the Big 12 and Oklahoma was in, those are the schools that are going to get the players. It would have spread out among the conferences, but now they've accumulated them into the two conferences that you guarantee they're going to be at the top longer because they have more teams to keep them there. The
Yeah.
Big Ten
That's
doesn't
fair.
no longer just have Ohio State because
That's
that's
fair.
what they did have for the longest time. Alabama may fall off without Nick Saban, but the SEC no longer only has to rely on Georgia because they immediately got Texas, who's good.
Texas and yeah. No, yeah, you're not wrong. It's just one of those things where I'm just like, I always want to leave room for competition. Not to say that the SEC and the Big Ten will just be trash in a few years, because that's not true. I just am not a fan of, again, back to the original point of like putting those things down on paper and then it comes down to it and there's actual levels of parity, because there will never be real parity in any of these college sports. But then we get down to it where like 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line, there's actually just a little bit more parity. And now the SEC is getting 4 spots and Big 10 actually has 3 teams that, excuse me, Big 12 actually has 3 teams that contend, but now they only get 2. That's where I'm like, I don't like that, because it's
Yeah,
just like, it could very well be college football is any given Saturday, Friday, or Thursday night. Thursday? Yeah, they play on
yeah,
Thursdays
they
sometimes.
play almost every day. They don't play as much
College
on Thursday, but they
college
do.
football is Saturday, any given
Yeah,
Saturday. So that's why I'm just like, like even the teams where like we can project all day that these 4 SEC teams are going to be the greatest, and then I mean even this year is kind of an example of that. Like Bama went 9-3. You know what I'm saying? And Indiana went 10-1. So I'm just kind of like, or 10-2, 10-11-1,
two.
whatever. So I'm just like,
Yeah,
10-2, 11-1. So it's just like,
one of
I think
them.
about stuff like that. I think about stuff like that. Or like even with
Yeah,
like SMU, for instance, like the conversation of whether or not we were actually going to make it in just simply because we didn't, because of like strength of schedule and all this other bullshit. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I would like to leave room for it to still be competitive in a way. But anyways, sorry, sidebar.
yeah. No, I agree. So for me, I I think I have a couple of thoughts about it. I think the Big 12 and the ACC are ultimately going to regret doing 5 plus 11 because it doesn't save them if they have a bad year. Because
Yeah,
or bad years. Because the thing you got to remember is there was always still um, at larges. So if you had a really good year, you could
you
still
could get that.
potentially get 3 or 4, but it protects you when you have a bad year. Where again, I'm not like when we do our. It's only 12, but if we were going to do it for 16, I don't know that I'm putting 2 Big 12 teams in a 16 team playoff for 2025, like this coming season.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's what, but ultimately the reason why, and I went back and forth basically each week because there was new data each week. The thing that I wanted the most with the four, like the automatic bids, is I feel like because these teams are soft, if they do 16, and the SEC is basically saying this, if they do 16 and there's not some promise basically by the committee that they're going to value their strength of schedule, they're not going to play these tough games anymore. I think it just came across my phone not that long ago that Illinois and Missouri just canceled a series. And those are not two of the best teams, but those are two equal teams in the
That would
Big
be a
Ten and
fun,
the
yeah.
SEC,
Yeah.
and they just canceled. And I didn't read it yet, so there may be something else behind it. But you're gonna see more of these. We're getting Ohio State, Texas this year. We got Michigan, Texas last year. We got Georgia, Clemson. Like I don't know if we're gonna get those anymore with the 16 team. Like you think 16 teams you're more likely, but they've already basically saying they're just not sure. The SEC doesn't want to go to 9 conference games. The ACC is not at 9 conference games. The SEC feels like they're not being respected because they had a down year, and they did have a down year, but they want everyone to worship at their feet and say how tough their conference is, and like all of this stuff where it's sort of hard where like the four sort of protected the non-conference, where with the new one, we just sort of have to hope that they stick to it. We have to hope that they still decide that they want to play these games. And that is sort of what concerns me. I do agree that for the conferences, it is definitely probably best for them to fight and to say like, no, we want to earn it and we want to do the 5+11. But I don't know if that is what's best for
The actual
fans
competition
and for the
around.
actual competition.
Yeah, I see what you mean by that. I don't know. And this is why when we had this conversation, I was like, I feel like the only way we're going to get to a place that makes sense is if you're doing like some sort of combination of both. Like maybe it's not four guaranteed teams, but maybe it's like 14 minimum or something. Like maybe it's more of like, okay, the Big Ten gets at least four teams in, and if a fifth or sixth team earns a spot, then they earn a spot. You know what I mean? But it's not to say like we're capping it at this. And same thing with ACC. Okay, you get your two guaranteed spots, but this happens to be a year where like maybe it's everybody gets one less, right? So the Big Ten and SEC gets three guaranteed plus a fourth option. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
maybe it's that sort of conversation where it's like you're gonna get your guaranteed because you pretty much meet this threshold every single year, but in order to keep the spirit of the competition, and maybe that turns into a play-in conversation. Maybe that turns into the fourth spot for the Big Ten and the SEC is a play-in, the third spot, or excuse me, the second spot in the ACC and the Big 12 is a play-in, and then there's whatever. Like I'm not a excuse me, I'm not a football expert, so I don't know how all of that would
And
shake
they,
out
they
schedule
did
wise.
discuss having a play in.
But I'm like, it might have to be like a play-in structure. Just might have to be what it is. And I will say, when the NFL started to switch over to that, it's not a plan, obviously, but the wild card situation, it made it more fun. It made it more competitive because it's like, okay, you guys are right here on the cusp. You don't deserve to say just go home, but you still got to play for your spot. So I don't know, because I feel like the guaranteed spots is not a great idea, but also the 5+11. Like I can't help but see that just turns into a Big Ten SEC Invitational every year, and then you
Yeah.
kind of throw in a couple of the guys who are just too good to ignore, but it's still going to be all Big Ten and not SEC.
Yeah,
So
because I fully believe, and it's not, and don't get me wrong, it's not going to be often, but I fully believe there's going to be a couple years where both the Big Ten and the SEC get 6 teams in. And they have 12 out of the 16.
16 spots, and that's fine if it's warranted, because I do feel like the conversations got real disingenuous towards the end of the season last season where
Yes.
it was not
SEC, bunch of
warranted.
crybabies.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, if it's warranted that it's six teams that the Big Ten that come out of the Big Ten and it's warranted, fine. It's six teams out of the SEC and it's warranted, fine. Don't fucking talk to me about a 9-3 South Carolina and why they deserve to be in over insert G5 team over here. Like, don't piss me off. That's 10 and 2.
Yeah.
Don't piss me
But
off.
I also think it's interesting, and this is what I think is going to happen. And here's the thing, right? Like, this is going to happen eventually to the Big Ten as well. Like, the Big Ten's up right now, but they won't be up forever.
All the time. Yeah.
The SEC is going to have a year where they get 6 teams in, and then they're almost all going to lose in the first round. That's what happened last year.
Yes.
The SEC got
Yes.
boxed. They got boxed, and they don't want to talk about what happened in the playoffs. They got boxed,
Booted out of there.
like,
Wow.
was there an SEC team in the Final Four? Was Georgia in the Final
Four?
Four?
Wait. Texas was, right?
Oh yeah. Boxed. But actually, that was a big game.
That was it was very competitive. But they were the last one left out of. Oh, excuse me, we are recording. They were the last ones left. Actually, let me just pull it up. Hold on.
I do need you to pause.
You do what?
Pause.
Oh.
But that's how I know you don't be listening to me.
I do be listening. Anyways, we're back on air. Welcome back. Excuse Jordan, he had to handle his domestic duties as a husband. So, that did not sound right. Hold on. Sorry. Anyways, welcome back. Okay, so what were you saying? Somebody was saying something.
You were talking.
Okay, so these numbers, because I just pulled up the bracket. These numbers are based on playoff participants by conference if it was a 16-team playoff.
Yes.
Okay, because I just looked at the bracket from last year, and the only two SEC teams I see are Texas, Tennessee,
so yeah, the SEC,
and Georgia.
So
those are the three from last year.
Right. The SEC is, according to last year, is the biggest beneficiary because all of their teams were at 14, 15, 16.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is why the Big Ten got 4. The Big Ten got 4 out of 12, but then between 12 and 17, they didn't have another player, so another team, so they wouldn't have got anyone extra. But the SEC would have went from 3 to 6 because South Carolina would have gotten in, Ole Miss would have gotten in, and who's the last one? It's
Bama.
not LSU.
Bama would have gotten in.
Bama would have gotten in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because
I was
like,
the two that they were crying about.
And y'all are just going to be okay. You got how many freaking championships? You'll be fine.
God forbid you only got 3 teams in when all of your other teams were mid and lost to freaking Vandy.
And then again, to that point, every single team got bounced out in the first round, literally except for Texas. Texas was the only one.
Alabama lost to Michigan.
Hello?
And the thing is, it's like, Ohio State lost to Michigan too. Right.
Georgia got smacked up by Notre Dame.
Also embarrassing. But Alabama lost to Michigan without half of their players playing, and most of Bama's team was playing. They got bullied. Nobody respects Illinois. Illinois beat South Carolina. So it's not only did you not get into the playoffs, you lost to teams that weren't even being considered to the playoffs in bowl games.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
let's be for real.
Okay. So do you have any final conference-wide thoughts as we move on to other things about the 16-team playoff? To talk about individual teams.
I mean, as you know, I'm never a fan of the whole SEC supremacy thing. So we're just gonna have to see how this all turns out. Because again, even with this being said, the conversation around the expanded playoffs seems to only benefit the SEC
and the Big Ten. But
I mean, the thing about the Big Ten, and I'm not even trying to be like any type of way. The thing about the Big Ten, though, is that the Big Ten has teams that were contenders. The Big Ten had a team in the championship this year. So, no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade. But I was not saying anything about any of the Big Ten teams making it in because they actually were worth their salt. They were actually 10-2. They were actually 11-1. So, and they were beating real competition. They weren't getting smacked up by freaking Vanderbilt. And this is no shade to Vanderbilt, but
if you ask the SEC, they all were real competition, and the Big Ten doesn't play real competition. So, and that's the thing. It's really stupid, right? I think the funniest thing is just the world is cyclical. You know what I'm saying? So it's never going to be this thing. No, seriously. If you look at these,
it's just so funny to me.
I'm just saying. So if you look at these things, right? When this first started, okay, if we look at 2014 to 2017. And that 4-year span, the Big Ten and a 16-team playoff would have had 15 teams in 4 years. The SEC would have had 11. So for 4 years, the Big Ten was better than the SEC. They had
And
more
even if you
teams.
look at it from the 12-team playoff standpoint, I think the Big Ten still gets more teams in.
Yes. So then, but if you look at the last 4 years, the Big Ten would have had 12, and the SEC would have had, what is it, 17? 17.
Yeah.
So it's like you
But
go up
again,
and
if you're looking at
down.
it from a 12-team standpoint,
The
the
Big Ten
SEC
had
goes
more.
down significantly.
Right. So it's just like it's one of these things where it's just like, and this is the biggest problem that I have with the SEC. Yes, for most of the sports you were dominant. Yes, you've won most of the championships. Yes, you have not been the most dominant conference the last 3 years.
And that's also okay.
And starting tomorrow, you may go on another legendary run. Like it's just the SEC is not, and this wasn't supposed to be an SEC complaining session, but the SEC is not allowing the sport to evolve.
Yeah.
Where it's just like we weren't that good this year. Get
And
it
that's
together
okay.
to be better next year.
Because no one's saying you guys suck forever. It's just,
Never,
but this is the problem. When you win too much, you forget that losing doesn't mean you suck. It just means that you lost. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It is okay. Everybody needs to take deep spiritual breaths. But that was my biggest issue. That's my last thought on the conferences, though. My biggest issue is that the SEC is now trying to strong arm the CFP situation into something where they always get what they want because they didn't get what they want last year. Please spare me when these other teams are fighting for their fucking lives to get just to the playoffs, just to say, or even get to a New Year's Six bowl. Like, let's go back.
Yeah.
Fighting for their fucking lives just to get to these other levels, and you're over here complaining about how many spots you have in the playoffs because you feel like you need to shut up. So anyways, that's all. That's all I have to say about the conferences. Because again, to your point, let's say that if we go to the 16 teams, okay, these are the numbers. But if we want to break it down up to the 12-team playoffs, the 12-team playoff to me was the best compromise. So I'm also kind of irritated that we're still even talking about how many teams we need to have in the playoffs. But because to me, 12 teams is plenty. I think 12 teams is plenty because then it's going to get very all teams mattery up in here. And all teams don't matter. Sorry, get over it. All teams do not matter. Like, there's got to be some damn competition up in here. So, anyways.
Agreed, 100%. So, yeah,
Angel just made a reverse layup. Oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever seen her do that.
Yeah, so conferences, this is where we are. So now we'll switch a little bit and we'll go and we'll talk a little bit about teams. So again, 11 years. I want the people to think about this. I want them to guess. There are two teams that would have made the playoffs 11 out of 11 years. I will give you 3 awkward seconds of podcasting time to think about it in your head and then to guess, since obviously we can't hear you. Did you say Alabama and Ohio State?
You better had at least Alabama.
If you didn't, well, honestly, the thing is, it's really Ohio State. In the 12-team playoff, there were years that Alabama didn't make it, and so yeah, Ohio State is if it stopped at 12. Actually, I can look at this up. I have all the data.
Wait a minute.
If it stopped at 12, go ahead.
The number of appearances based on 16 teams. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. And so if it stopped at 12, Ohio State's the only team that would have made it every year.
Yeah.
Because it's expanded to 16, Alabama also joins that list. Yeah. Now, this one is slightly harder. And again, you all can't see this, so I just want you to guess. There's one team who's made it 9 times. There's 2 teams that's made it 8. I'll give you 3 awkward podcast seconds to guess. And you just have to hold yourself accountable on if you got it right. 9 is Georgia. I feel like some people would have guessed this, but they also may have guessed the next team that's 8. Clemson. I think the next team that's 8, Clemson, they would have guessed. I don't think they would have guessed Oklahoma because I think people forget how good Oklahoma was in the beginning.
At one point, yeah.
So I think they probably would have, if I said guess 4, I think people would have said Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson. I don't know if they would have gotten Oklahoma at 8.
Well, because this is based on 16, right? So
yes,
looking at what it was based on prior to that, Oklahoma's missing it a couple times. So
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have guessed Oklahoma. Yeah, actually, hold on. No, Mary. Okay, hold on. Oklahoma. Yeah, because they weren't even in the conversation in 2014. They weren't in it. They were in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Oh, actually, no. 2020. They wouldn't have made it in 2021. They would not have made it in 2022. They would not have made it in 2023. And then they didn't make it last year. So, yeah, I wouldn't have guessed Oklahoma either because it's been the last couple of years where it's like, you know, stick to the rivers and the lakes that you used to. Stick to the baseball or the
Look,
softball, whatever it is that they do.
you know,
The next four teams that
four.
have been in 7 times to me are extremely guessable.
I think
2 of them at
maybe,
least.
yeah. I really wish I didn't have this data and someone would explain it to me so I could guess because I would love to know what I guessed. But I do agree that they're probably largely guessable. So the next four that's tied, and so this is tied for one. This would be three. This is tied for four. So they're tied for the fifth most appearances. It's Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Penn State.
It's
And
seven
so
appearances each.
part of the reason we want to do this, right, is like, and this DJ, this may be you're going to learn a little bit of college football history as we talk about this. So the head coach at Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, is now the head coach at LSU. Brian Kelly is known for being one of the really good coaches. He sort of has like a James Franklin kind of, maybe he might be a little bit more respected, maybe not, but he sort of has like a James Franklin thing where it's like you're good, you're always good, but you can never win the big one. He rarely made the 14 playoff. Does he leave? Do we get Marcus Freeman if it's been 16 teams and he gets 7 appearances? Or do they still ultimately become unhappy if he gets there 7 times, but he doesn't win a national championship? How do we view James Franklin? Like we've always said, Penn State is one of the biggest beneficiaries of the expanded playoffs. How do we view James Franklin if he gets in 7 times? You have this extra thing. Or also, do they still reach the same point that they're at today? But now the argument's different. Now it's you don't beat Ohio State and Michigan. Now it's you make the playoffs, but you don't win a
You
national
don't win.
championship.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, it's hard to say, of course. You can't project who would have won a national championship because in a 16-team playoff, the Alabama dynasty, they don't win all of those. They won maybe 6 or something like that. I would say they probably won 4. Like there's 2 of
Mm-hmm.
them they don't get. Ohio State probably gets one off of them, and then maybe Notre Dame, maybe Penn State, maybe Georgia has a third instead of only having 2. Maybe Clemson has a third instead of only like you
Only having
don't know
2.
how
Yeah.
it shakes out. That's one of the benefits that I like about the expanded playoff is you just get more games. And with more games, there's more things that can happen. And while again, I don't think any I'm sorry, right? When we talk about the expanded playoff, we're not talking about Iowa. But when we talk about this group of teams, instead of if you look at the last 11 years, who's won? Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State. That's 4 teams. If it's 16, you have the chance for someone of this group to have won, which is now Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Penn State. So we just went from 4 teams to potentially 10 teams, to potentially 7 in an 11-year period. Instead of it essentially being 4 teams, maybe it's 7 who's won,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so that's like when we talk about the expanded playoffs, I'm very adamant that I'm sorry, this is not for Utah. This is not for Arizona. This is not for BYU. It's not for UCF. It's not for Iowa State. It's not for Oregon State. Who it is for, though, is Penn State. It is for Oregon. It is for Notre Dame. And so maybe some people are happier if those schools are winning and it's not just the
The same
Alabama,
old 4
Georgia,
schools.
Clemson
Yeah.
invitational, right?
Yeah. It's boring. It's boring.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was a lot of data and that was a lot of numbers, but I was with you. Were y'all with him? Because I was with him. Um, I have nothing to say to that because you are absolutely correct. I feel like a lot of the years that especially Bama and Georgia won, it could be arguable that there may have been other teams that could have, you know, been competitive if it hadn't been for the fact that the playoff was only 4 teams. Um, but the next group is Florida State and Ole Miss with potentially 5 appearances. They're still towards the bottom, though. I don't think like Florida State. I think their best year they were like 5th, maybe, or I guess in 2014 they actually made the play. They actually made the playoffs, but um, after that they're pretty much down towards the bottom. So they would make it even in the 12-team playoffs, but really a lot of this is really heavily based on it being 16 teams that they make it in 5 times. Same thing with Ole Miss. The rest of the teams, I mean, at that point, it's what am I trying to say? At that point, it is about right place, right time. I hate to say it like
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
but it is about like right place, right time, right? You know, you peaked at the right time. Like even with LSU having potentially 3 appearances if it's a 16-team situation, but we also know with LSU, that's, I mean, when did they win the championship? 2019. That was probably not probably that was their best year because it would have to be 12 teams and it would have to be 12-team playoffs any for the rest of these appearances to make sense. So you know, that was definitely like right place, right time, the rest of these teams. But to your point, expanding the playoffs at least expands the parity amongst the top, which is I think what
Yes.
everybody wants. Like Penn State should have won a championship by now, arguably. Notre Dame should have won a championship by now, arguably. So Oregon,
Yeah.
they're getting there.
I think one of the things that's interesting about looking at these teams, in my opinion, right, is Texas only has
3.
appearances, and 2 of them are the last 2 years where they made it no matter what. Because this year they made the 12, the year before that they made the 4,
Mm-hmm.
and then when did they make? When's the third time they made it?
It would have been if it's 16 in 2018 because they would have been 15.
2018. Yeah, and then it's 2018. So that just shows how bad Texas has been, right? Like I also like looking at this because like you can say like Texas has been bad, right? But to say if there were 16 teams in the playoff and Texas only would have gotten in 3 times, and 2 of them were the
Were
last
the
two
last 2 years?
years
Yeah.
with the new coach, it's like that's why it's also nice, like where you expand because it gives you more data, right? To say, wow, Michigan State would have made the playoffs more times than Texas. Who would have bet that? Michigan
Michigan
State would have
State.
made the playoffs more time than USC. Who would have bet that? Like
Yeah.
maybe you know, right? Because you're really into college football and you're really paying attention. But if I told you in 2014 that 11 years, 16 teams, like just projecting, just letting you know, I have a crystal ball, this is what's going to happen, no one would believe it. And that's the other thing that I think that's interesting and that I like doing this. But then you also get like random teams, right? Like Oregon State makes it. SMU made it last year. Tulane gets
Coastal
in.
Carolina would have had
Coastal
one.
Carolina gets in. Western Michigan gets in, right?
Yeah.
Arizona and Arizona State both get in twice, right?
Tulane.
Wisconsin gets in 3 times. Boise, BYU is in.
Yeah.
Indiana's in twice. Kansas State. And so that's the other, like I always talk about, because I love college football. And so I always talk about the things that um, the things that I enjoy the most about college football and the thing that I think people forget the most is that they're kids. And so even if like not like we need to stop viewing the sport from the lens of a championship because there are so many cool things that you get in bowl
So
games.
much more that goes with
I
it.
don't know if
Yeah.
bowl games are cool anymore. This is an old example and I love this example, but I remember when I was in college, Ohio State went to the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl and they all got PS4s.
They still do that. They did it as a
Like
Hawaii Bowl.
so like the title sponsor typically gives you something, right? And so like or for a lot of players like Kent State went to a bowl game. They went to the Jamaica Bowl, I believe it is. So Kent State, the school, paid for all the players to get passports. You have 100 black kids who got a free passport just by playing football, right? Who also get new clothes, whose family like they pay for the families to go. So you're also giving your family a vacation to go to and not all of the sites are cool, but like to go to Jamaica, to go to Arizona, to go to Florida, to go to all these places. And so the other thing with this is like, yeah, maybe TCU never wins a championship, but you have 3 separate TCU teams that for the rest of their life get to tell their kids and their
They
family
went.
that they went to the playoffs and that
Yeah.
they got to play whoever, and maybe they upset someone. I mean, TCU was literally just in the national championship.
2 years ago.
They
And
didn't
that's the thing
win.
that
Does that?
That's what I'm agreeing with you. That's all. I'm like, this stuff matters. Like, it matters so much more before you even get to the championship. Like, it matters because even
Yep.
still, like, even on the professional level, making the playoffs is enough. Not that it's enough and that it makes you like these. What am I trying to say? Not that it's enough in the sense that like, oh, it's no, I'm correct. Making the playoffs puts you in the upper echelon, right? Whether you won a championship or not is moot. Making the playoffs puts you in the upper echelon. Making the playoffs makes you a team to watch. Making the playoffs makes you a destination team that teams want, that recruits want to play on. Things like that. Like, it's good. It's good for the brand. So it's like expanding the playoffs is so much more than just like championships. You know what I mean? It's about a lot of things. Like, I agree with you because even on the professional level, like, you can't take away the fact that the Warriors made the playoffs. No, they didn't make it far, but you can't take that away. They were
No.
there, you
Yep.
know.
And maybe one day we'll get big on this platform. Maybe we won't. But the one thing that I'll always stand by is it's 130 teams, and I'm an Ohio State fan. I get it. I think that helped me, but I also went to Kent State. So like the teams that I'm in the direct opposite of the two teams that I like to follow. But I think we get, even us having this conversation, I want to reiterate, like, the playoff is good. The playoff is not only about the national championship. Indiana could be ass next year, and they're not going to be. To be clear, they're not going to be. But you can't take the memories away from those kids and also you have to remember the college students. You can't take the memory
The
away from
students,
those
oh
college
my
students
gosh,
who got to watch Indiana win 10 games and make it to the playoffs. Like, college football is so much more than wins a national championship. Like, it's not the NFL where there's only 32 teams and you have to win a Super Bowl. It's not the NBA where there's 30 teams. There's 130. Not every team has the same goal. They just don't. Kent's goal is not the same as Ohio State's. Indiana's goal is not the same as Ohio State's. There's a person that listens to this podcast who's an Ohio State fan and an Indiana fan. And we talk a lot, and he was the perfect example of like, man, fuck it, Indiana's good, like, great, and then Ohio State like doesn't beat a team by 50 points, and he's like, God, that was awful. And
yeah,
so it's like Indiana losing the first round, and it's amazing. But if Ohio
yeah,
State wouldn't have won the national championship, he would have been disappointed. And so, looking at these two things, just two different fan bases, you can want different things. And like,
yeah,
super happy where Indiana is. Of course, it would have been great if Indiana won a national championship, but you can't tell him or anyone else that Indiana making the playoffs wasn't one of the best seasons of their lives, while he's also rooting for Ohio State to win a national championship. So you can
being
be happy for Indiana winning 10 games and be mad that Ohio State won 11 but lost to Michigan. Like, the sport is just not the same. It's
yeah,
just not, even in conferences. And so I want us to remember that it would be great if Iowa made the playoffs 3 times. It would be great if Arizona made the playoffs 2 times in 11 years, Cincinnati 2 times in 11 years, Stanford 2 times in 11 years, UNC, West Virginia, Coastal, Colorado, Georgia Tech, Houston. Like, we have to stop just looking at the sport as only um,
national
national
championships.
championships.
Yeah,
And that's
I
why
mean,
I'm also a fan of expanding the playoffs, because it's just so much more experience for the players and for the fans, and just another thing to be happy about. And honestly, to be selfish, that's another thing for us on these podcasts to talk about.
it's also, I am always a fan of more games. I am always going to be a proponent of more games. But I mean, at the end of the day, to your point, I experienced that at SMU this last year. We were booty cheeks and dust. I was even saying throughout our preview shows, throughout the beginning of the season, how much I was not sure about SMU. I did not get on the train until we won, I think, like 8 games. I was not sure
Yeah.
about SMU.
I was like, you see SMU, and you was like, shut up.
I was
We
like,
ain't done
I'm
nothing
I'm
yet. I'm
watching.
like,
I'm there. I
damn.
was there for most of the games. And
Like, I'm more excited than you are. Like, he's like,
because
we might
but
blow
because
it.
SMU football has disappointed me for so many years that I was just kind of like, listen, I'm glad that we're winning. I'm glad that everybody's happy because that was making my job in the alumni office a lot easier. It's real
Yeah,
easy to get people to volunteer when we're winning
you're
football. It's
winning.
real
Yeah,
easy to get them to throw watch parties when we're winning, right? So it made my job actually easier, but it was so important. It was so important. Like, so many conversations that I was having with alums, so many conversations that I was having just in passing with other staff or other faculty or whatever, how important this was to us, that we were doing well. Us making the playoffs truly was just a cherry on top. It was important that we were doing well, that we were
Yes.
winning games, that we're selling out our home games for the first time ever, that we are like, that was so important. And it was important to the students. It was important to the alums. It was important to the fundraisers. It was important to the boosters. It was important to the brand. It was important. It was important. Like, no, okay, we got bounced out of the first round, got our asses kicked because we thought we were tough and didn't put no damn sweaters on. But that's not the point. It was important. And
Yeah.
us making the college football playoffs was important. We have commemorative blankets that only like
Yes.
200 people got because we made it. We were there. We were in the
Yep.
building. We sold out our tailgate. We had to start turning people away because we didn't have enough space to accommodate everybody at the tailgate at a game where we got our asses clapped. But at the end of the day, every single person walked away from that, even with us losing, every single person walked away and was like, I was just happy that we were here. I'm just happy that we are in the conversation now. I'm happy that XYZ. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
That's important. That's important.
Yes.
Like,
And
it's
it.
that's what matters. Like, this is so, like, college football is so much more than national championships. It matters. Those matter. It's cool. It's great to have the trophies
Absolutely.
and to
Of
have those
course.
and the conference championship trophies and all of that. Duh, there's a hierarchy to everything.
But
But like,
also, while you finish, conference championships matter.
oh yeah,
Again,
they
I don't know
matter.
how.
Yes, they
I'm not. No,
matter.
no, no. I'm not saying you're not saying that, but people are acting like they don't matter. People are saying you should get rid
Yeah.
of conference championship games for the playoffs. Ask any Ohio State fan how happy they are that Ohio State hasn't won the Big Ten in 5 years.
Yeah, like that's
We just
crazy.
won a national championship, and I'm still sitting here thinking we have to win the Big Ten next year.
No, it
Ohio
was
State
very
can't
upsetting
be
that
a
we did not win
school
the
that
ACC.
does
That was
not
very
win.
upsetting.
Right,
Like,
and so it's like that also matters.
yeah,
Like Penn
we
State
almost
didn't
didn't get
make it
our
to the
playoff
national.
spot.
Yeah,
Like,
like Penn State didn't make it to the national championship, and I bet you they're still upset that they also didn't beat Oregon. They feel like they should have beat Oregon. Oregon fans who like to talk shit about Ohio State fans and other things, they're on social media talking about we won the Big Ten more recently than you. Like all of these things matter. Bowl games matter. Conference championships matter. New Year's Six games matter. The playoff matters. Like it does. It matters to the students. It matters to the fans. It matters to which we don't talk about often, but the business of
the
sports. Like
business,
it
yes.
matters for donors, for recruits. Like all of these things are important, and that is why I'm pro expansion. Also, I just want to watch the games.
That's what I'm saying. More games. Like, who's against more games? Like, please. I am never going to be an advocate that we don't need more games. Like, I'm always going to be happy about more games. So whether it's 12, 14, 16, whatever the hell, whatever they come up
Now,
with
if we
the
got to like
formula.
24, all right,
All right, we're
come
doing a
on.
lot. Again, because this is not an all sports matter moment. Okay.
Yes.
Caitlin Clark and Nafisa Collier have been officially named the captains of the two all-star teams for the WNBA. But anyways, yeah, I'm never going to be against more games. But again, this is not all football matters. This is not that. This is not everybody gets a spot. So don't piss me off. It still needs to be like a level of competition to everything. I do think that 16 teams would have to be the absolute most.
I
But I'm
agree. I don't want to see
surprised
more
at,
than 16. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm surprised at how long it went on with it just being four. I'm surprised at that. So,
Truly.
because realistically, it should have expanded to 12 probably just about 10 years ago.
And
But
honestly, it should have been 12 immediately, but they were scared. Like
yeah,
I don't remember all the politics around it, but they thought that people would hate the playoffs. Basically, they didn't think it would do well, and
yeah.
so like they made it 4 instead of 8 or 12, which they wanted to do initially. And then I think with some, my theory is that the sport was just in chaos with conference realignment and the
Yeah.
pandemic and like that sort of stuff. That it just never got serious consideration.
Yeah.
Because it
Which is
definitely should not have been 4 for 10
for as
years.
long as it has been. So I'm like, even if it stays at 12, I feel fed. I feel
Yeah.
because again, SMU's not making it in if it's not a 12 team playoff.
Mm-mm.
Like a lot of these other teams who we've already mentioned are making it in if it's not a 12 team playoff, and then even more so if it's 16. So I just feel like do what's good for the sport, do what's good for the brands, do what's good for it. And again, we should talk about the business of sports. That's bigger TV distro deals, that's more commercials, that's more, I mean, that's more money that the conference stands to make from appearances. That's it's
With
more money
revenue
for
share now,
everybody.
that's
It's
more
more
that's
revenue to
more money
share
that
because these
the
like this is if we're gonna in this NIL era, y'all could benefit from having some more games.
yes.
So
Yep. So that is the that is the playoff postmortem. That is the look behind of the 16 team playoffs. We have no idea when it's going to be 16 teams,
it
but
will
it is
be
almost
12 in
guaranteed.
2025.
Yes, it is almost guaranteed to be 16. And I do I don't I hope I'm not wrong about this. I do think they approved straight seating for 2025. Like I think that was
That
already
was on the
announced.
table. That was on the table. I do not know if it was approved. Hopefully it was because the seating does get a little convoluted. Um, but I guess we can look at. Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
Okay. But yes, we're talking obviously futuristically. If y'all hadn't catch that, this is like earliest that this could possibly happen is the 2026 season. So 2025 is still going to be our regularly scheduled programming. I am
It
very
will be
interested.
straight seating. I thought
Okay, and
so,
it will
but
be
yeah.
straight seating. What about these bowl games? Is it going to operate the same way? These bowl games, like Chick Fil A Peach Bowl, is going to be
Ah,
semifinal. We got to figure that out as
that's a
well.
good question, and that's a perfect way to end the show. And that we don't know, but we can say what we want. And I think it needs to be. I need. They need to get rid of the Bulls. Like not
Oh,
totally, but they need to be out of. They need to be out of the playoffs. So
okay.
in a 16 team playoff, it's going to be 4 rounds, I
Yeah,
think. And so
yeah.
basically, I'm not even going to count the rounds. It doesn't matter. In my opinion, um, the if in my ideal, right, the national championship would be on New Year's. So that would
Yes.
always be the Rose Bowl. You can say whatever you want to. You can call it unfair. You can say whatever you want to. I think it should always be the Rose Bowl. Also, just because I can't get it out of my system, I am a higher education professional. This season does not need to be going to the middle of January. If
Yes,
it
we
ends
know.
on
Yes, yes,
January
yes.
1st, if it ends on January 1st, they get 2 weeks at home for most schools with their family before they go back to school.
Yes.
Since it's not going to do that, I think however the calendar works, the semifinals can be bowl games
Which I believe that was what happened this time.
this
Well,
year.
both
Well,
the
they were all
quarterfinals
bowl
and the
games this year.
semifinals were.
Right.
Yeah.
The first 2 rounds need to be on campus. So this year, the first round was on campus, and the second round wasn't, and that also messed up the schedule. In my opinion, the first 2 rounds need to be on campus, and then however you want to intermix the bowl games after that, that's fine. Like you can basically the New Year's Six bowl games are the ones that's going to stay: the Peach Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Rose Bowl,
Cotton
the
Fiesta Sugar.
Cotton Fiesta Sugar. Yes, those will stay. Those can mix in the fun. And honestly, what I would do is I would do. Do you know how it works? Do you know how the 14 playoff worked with the bowls?
No. I
So the
weren't
14,
the bowls like qualifiers basically? Like that's how
sort
you got
of.
in?
So the bowls in the 14 playoff, there's 3 games, right?
Hmm.
There's 6 bowl games. So essentially, they alternated. Where I don't know exactly how they did it, but every year, 3 teams like they would get it right. They would do 2 bowls would get the quarterfinals, and then one would get the championship, and it would rotate. So that
Okay.
however it worked every 6 years, they all got a semifinal and a championship. However, it works. That's what I
Yeah.
would do. The last 3 games, you have 6 teams. The last 3 games are bowl games, and you just keep the same rotation that you had for the 14 playoff, but all the other rounds are on campus.
But weren't the bowls also like conference associated? Some of them?
Not so they were when they weren't in the playoff.
Okay.
So, like for example, the Rose Bowl. So the Rose Bowl is a Big Ten, Pac-12 thing. So
Right.
when the Rose Bowl was in the playoff, it couldn't do that.
Correct.
But what they would do though is, let's say Ohio, the Rose Bowl was a quarterfinal game. Was it right? Was a
Yeah.
semifinal game.
No, it was a
If
quarterfinal. It
Ohio's
was Ohio Oregon.
no,
Ohio
I'm
State
sorry, I'm
Oregon.
talking about and
Prior.
yeah. So
Okay.
the way it worked previously is the highest rated team would go to the bowl closest to them if it was in. So, for example, if the Rose Bowl was a semifinal game and Ohio State was the number 1 seed, they would go to the Rose Bowl. So they tried to tie it like that, where
Okay.
if it was possible, if you were the higher seeded and you had a bow tie and that year came up, they would do that. But they were much looser with the rules because if Ohio, like if a Big Ten team didn't make it, you still had to go to the Rose Bowl.
I'm computing. Okay, that doesn't make sense, but okay.
Basically, they when they were in the playoffs, they no longer the conferences no longer mattered. But if they could make it work, they would. Does that make it easier?
Sure.
It wasn't mandatory, but if they could make it work, they would.
They would. Okay, so because I was like, I was reading about it and it was like certain bowl, like the bowl game structure is inevitably going to change because of like conference
Right.
ties. So I'm kind of like, okay. To me, I'm like, I didn't hate the way it was done last year. Like, I
I
didn't hate
did.
it.
The second
I,
round should have been on campus.
I do believe that there should have been more games on campus. Um, but with the way that the 12 team playoff like worked out, it made the most sense for the quarterfinals the to be four bowls and then the semis to be two and then the championship just to be the championship. Like that made sense to me. But if it's going to expand to 16, then you at least have the ability to do like kind of what you said and spread them, not spread them, but like essentially, you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So I don't know because I am not a bowl game historian, but that's going to be really like interesting how they work that out because
Yeah, and honestly,
there's so
like
much
if
history associated with these bowls too. Like, so I don't know.
yeah, if ultimately that's how it works out, sure. But I think the reason why I'm so adamant that I think the first two rounds should be on campus is like Oregon was the number one seed or whatever they were, and they played Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They didn't get to host a game on campus, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, I agree.
As an Ohio State fan, we got to host a game on campus, but it was because it was a bad year.
Yeah.
More years than not, Ohio State is not going to have a low enough seed to host a game on campus. So
Yeah.
you're robbing the teams that are good, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State, Oregon, like those teams in whatever year,
It
you're
was
robbing
Georgia,
them a
Boise,
chance
Oregon, and Arizona State that did not get to
this year.
host a game.
And then,
Yeah.
like, why didn't Georgia get to play on
Yeah.
campus? Why didn't Oregon
Yeah.
get to play on? That's my thing. That's why I want the first two rounds so that everyone gets a chance, even if you get a bye, to play a game on campus.
I agree. I think that's
And
I think that
then
makes sense.
do the bowl games. And that's why I think the way it works is the bowl games only can work if they're the final three games. But and that's the thing, they legitimately already have the system in place for the 14 playoff. There's already a rotation, it's already determined. Just keep that and then put the other games on campus. But because they
But
did
doesn't
it
that eliminate some
differently,
of the bowls? Because there's six bowls.
right, but they alternated.
But they
So
all
the bowls
happen every
always, yes, they always happened, but they weren't always in the playoff.
okay. Okay. Yes,
So the
I'm caught
bowls
up
will
now.
always happen,
Yes.
but they won't always be playoff
I
games.
am caught up now. Yes. Okay. So you're
And
basically
so,
saying do the same thing, pick the three bowls, have it rotate however it needs to rotate for
right,
them to be basically semifinal games and then the championship game. And then, yes. Okay.
everything else on
Yes.
campus,
Everything
yes.
else is on campus. I agree. I do think that it was not the most fun that some teams that could have benefited from hosting games did not get to do that. So, yes, I agree. But we'll just have to see what they
Yeah.
decide on that.
And ultimately, the only thing that we know is it will change. We don't know how,
They said,
but
yeah, they
it
said
does
this year is the
have
only
to
year that it's going to be
change.
structured like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The Bulls, and the Bull contract is up as well. So there will be some
yeah. There's a lot.
changes with that.
Yeah,
We just don't know exactly how. The Bulls will be fighting for their life, and the teams will be fighting for more control, and we'll ultimately see what they end up.
good
So,
times.
yeah, absolutely. Do we have any final thoughts on the history of the 16 team playoff if it existed or what we're hoping to see in the future?
We are now what 9 Saturdays away. I believe it's 9, maybe 8 Saturdays away from college football. So everybody get gird your loins and get excited because we are about to start previewing all of these conferences, all these teams. We're going to be getting all up in their business and talking about what we think is going to happen. So I'm really excited about that because now I have 1 year of college football under my belt. So we'll see if that is going to be doing me any good.
It will. It'll help.
But yeah, it does gonna be really interesting. Whatever decision is made, we're getting more games. So I'm
Thank
thrilled
you.
personally.
I have nothing to say. That's the perfect way to end the show. Whatever decisions made, we're getting more games. So, as always, thank you for listening. We will catch you next week. Follow the show on Instagram at Get Defensive Sports Network, on YouTube at Get Defensive Sports Network. Follow us on TikTok at GD Sports Network. And here's the thing: we've been upping our content game, but our content during the season is going to be much better because it's
Oh my
not just
gosh,
going to be
we're hilarious.
random things that we're talking about. It's not going to be 7 episodes on the playoffs. We're going to have real games. This is the time to lock in. Tell your friends and
Get
family
in it.
that preview season starting. I know there's a bunch of people who don't really follow college football in the off season because there's other things, but the off season's almost over. Send it to your friends, send it to your cousins, send it to somebody, tell them to follow it on YouTube. Take their phone and follow us on YouTube. Do whatever you got to do because our time to shine is coming up, baby. You don't want to miss it. But we'll catch
Period.
you next week.